You may remember Tara Reade. She's the woman who accused President Biden of sexual assault. She had a paper trail. The Democrats did not seem to care. Now, she has lived through a hell over the last few decades because of this, and she recently received political asylum in Russia, where she was offered a passport. She is currently living there. She has visited the war zone in the Donbas as well, so we wanted to let her tell her story from soup to nuts, in case you didn't know it, in case you realize who are the people on the margins who still have the Justice Department not quite settling her case. She is an American citizen. She does have a unique perspective, and so it's always nice to talk to her. Thank you so much, Tara. It's great to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, Natali. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Okay, why don't I really want to get your perspective on where the war is right now as an American, because you are not someone who just was hunted by the American government and then hates your own country. In fact, quite the opposite. So take me from, I want to establish you as a credible accuser. If you read her book, Left Out, you would know this. The fact that you have reported President Biden and you have been hunted ever since, and why you feel the safest in Russia right now.
Sure. The book is called Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In. It's still available on Amazon. And even with all the suppression, it got some good reviews. So, but as far as what I told in that book was just about the story before I came to Russia, which was about working for the U.S. Senate, working for the U.S. Congress. And while I was working for the U.S. Senate, I worked for Biden and was assaulted by him, reported it. And that report is still sealed in University of Delaware. I tried to take legal action to no avail. And then when Biden became president, he basically did what he did to some political opponents. He treated me as if I were a political opponent. He basically went after me and weaponized the DOJ and FBI and the media. And that, for a citizen, for a regular citizen like myself with very few resources, it was daunting. And I know I came on your show and talked about, being threatened with prison, having my life threatened, my family's life was threatened. It was quite scary. And I had gone to Moscow to oversee the translation of my book here. And I was just going to stay for a week. I was on vacation. And then it became clear that if I went back, the Biden regime was going to try to imprison me and try to sanction me for going on Channel 1, I guess. And they really went after me. So since then, I have filed a suit against the DOJ and FBI for harassment. My lawyer's still working on it. It's still kind of grinding away. There's still a criminal case supposedly that's sealed in Northern California against me. I don't know what it is from the Biden regime days. But when I came to Moscow, Russia, Maria Butina and Margarita Simenon from RT helped me a great deal. And they made sure I knew how to navigate, as one, when you come to a country, you can't just stay, you have to apply for paperwork. So I applied for asylum, political asylum, and was luckily granted that. They helped me with that very daunting process. And, as I came to stay in Russia longer, it's really wonderful. And, I really thank Margarita Simenon, who's been through a lot herself, actually. She's right now fighting cancer. And bless her, I hope she is doing well. She's lost her husband, so she's been through a great deal and been targeted by the U.S. But she gave me work here at RT, so I've been able to stay in my profession, stay in my in the work that I do as a geopolitical analyst. The cost of living here is better, it's safer. Yeah, so it's been a journey, but I landed and then, made the best of it.
Right. Why do you think the Trump Justice Department has not intervened? Have you asked them to?
I've tried, but I don't have a lot of connections with the Trump administration itself. I have tried and gone through channels, but I think there's many people that are still waiting. I think there's just so much, and right now, there's a lot of things going on. I don't think my case is a priority at this point.
Right. And you and I, we text a little bit, and I was saying that after I just read Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas' autobiography, and I did not realize how much Joe Biden had a hand in dragging Anita Hill out in front of the Senate to thwart Clarence Thomas, how much of it he orchestrated in order to, I mean, it was horrible. And I wish I had known that. That was when Joe Biden was snake Joe Biden. Now we don't even know what Joe Biden is. So you don't know. It's clearly not that Joe Biden who has you in his sights anymore. He is in La La Land. So who are the actors behind that Joe Biden that would still want to do this to you, do you think? Is it really evidence of the deep state?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's that, but it's even deeper than that in the sense that, or a little more immediate, let's say. His immediate family, Jill Biden, whom I met before, Hunter, I think is trying to prop up his father's legacy. You saw him doing a little bit of a media tour himself, trying to deny the existence of the Hunter Biden laptop. You know, and this goes to the elite Democrats in general. They are very masterful at trying to weaponize media to a certain narrative. And you know, I'm sort of caught up in that whole cyclone of that. And I think that you know, like the Hunter Biden laptop was Miranda Devine, I believe, originally broke that story with New York Post, and then it was, you know, it was suppressed.
Yes.
And so on. So, you know, you have a history of the Democrats just basically lying or covering up scandals and going to whatever lengths necessary to get their agenda across. And that's part of the deep state, or the deep state is like the elites, you know, and you see that with the war in Ukraine, right? You see all the misinformation that the Western media is putting out about the origins of how that war started, and about what it's really like. And I've been to the Donbas, so I can really give an accurate depiction that they're lying.
Right. I do want to get to your perspective on geopolitics in a minute. But I also just want to, because every time I see your name, it makes me so angry that the media won't help you tell your story. And yet your story is, in the details, very similar to what E. Jean Carroll accused Donald Trump of doing. But you have a paper trail. You did report it. You have corroborating evidence. And now E. Jean Carroll is treated as this brave woman who accused Trump, and you are purposely pushed down. And that must be very hard to take. And it's hard for me to even say it. I'm furious about it. Both of you deserve the same opportunity to say your story at the very least.
Yeah, you know, it's taken me a long time to, but now that I understand sort of the how they go about weaponizing the media to smear someone, whether it be a person, an individual, or an idea, or a country, there's the same tactics used over and over again. And so I've been able to sort of intellectualize it, if you will. But yeah, it's you know, I worked very hard in the U.S. Senate and U.S. Congress, volunteering for my country. You know, I care about America. So it felt personal for a long time, and it felt like a betrayal because I had given so much. And then when I was in trouble, my country abandoned me. That's how it felt. But in reality, it's not Americans' fault. It's just this elite cabal that's really in, you know, the people that are involved with Epstein, the same group, the same 1% of the 1% are controlling everything. And, you know, it's, you know, and thank goodness for you and Clayton and, you know, Tucker Carlson and a few others that are trying to tell the truth.
And so it would be easy for Americans to ignore you and think, well, you're just a Putin lover or something to that effect. When those of us who have studied Russia since the war in Ukraine broke out have realized, oh, kind of we're the bad guys. That the story we're told about Russia is not, you know, that they're led by this crazy megalomaniac KGB. It's not like that at all. And in fact, it was Parliament that voted for this military operation. We're not told that. So why don't you give us your perspective on Russia not as this sort of sycophantic Russian lover, but as someone who is just trying to understand geopolitics and a place for yourself in the world.
Well, I'm glad you said it in that way because that's how I started my, career as a in geopolitical analysis was looking, I have a law degree from Seattle U and studied international relations but I had not been to Russia, but I was looking at different systems and more politics from, a sky view, if you will. So more looking at cycles and things like that. So my fascination with Russia came about because of the way Vladimir Putin and his administration was able to pull Russia out of the 90s, sort of get rid of the oligarchs that were trashing the country and taking, advantage and foreigners, and really streamline it to where it is now, which is when I saw it was really amazing. They have a very vibrant middle class. For instance, like I think and I had just read this, I think last week, 92% of Muscovites own their own flats, for instance.
Wow.
You have free healthcare, you have free education, but some of it's paid for. And then you have capitalism here, but you have new capitalism. So you're in the beginning cycle of capitalism and innovation and economic growth, right? So you have young people able to buy homes, a dacha, which is a vacation home, have their city flat, travel, so you see a lot of economic stability. The instability came when the West decided, what are they doing? They're getting too successful. So let's coup Kiev in 2014. So really, my fascination came around right before the military operation. In 2019, I had done an interview and talked about that if Biden was elected, his goal was to start a war with Russia. And they did. I got in a lot of trouble in the media for saying that in 2019. But then Biden did the proxy war against Russia
Yeah.
via Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. It's really hard to read books and then, I mean, it's easy to follow the American media and blame Russia, but it's really hard if you actually study to not blame the United
You
States.
just have to, you have to look outside the agendas. Like when you're reading the New York Times and Washington Post, look at who owns them, follow the money, think about what their agenda is. Same thing with Fox News, same thing with any news outlet at all. But currently I'm working for RT, but and I'm telling you the honest truth. And I think other people can back me up on this. I've never once been told what to say or not to say. I've never been censored on air. And I have heard people be critical here at RT, and they
And
have the
keep their
freedom to do
jobs.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have the freedom to do so. And I don't know what it's like there, Natalie. I mean, you're an independent, you own your own space, but there are other people that do what you do that are beholden to the overlords, so to speak, and don't have that freedom, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you should also ask that about Redacted, and we tell you who our sponsors are. It's clear in our newsletter. They're mostly supplements
Yeah.
and things like that we believe in. But yes, it's a valid question, and I think that anyone who comes to their, media should ask that question. And so now we find ourselves a year into the Trump administration. President Trump had promised to work with President Putin to end the war quickly. None of that has happened. It's not the sexy war anymore. It doesn't get the coverage, despite Zelensky trying so hard to get the cameras turned back on in front of him and his family. So where do you think the war stands right now, and what have you seen in your trip to the Donbas?
Well, I went to the Donbas and it was, I'll be honest, I was really nervous to go because I'm on that kill list, the Mikrovitz list, which is a website that has different people, Tucker Carlson, I think the Pope, other
Yeah.
people. But like there have been people on that list that have been, that they use terrorist tactics to kill people.
Yes.
So I was, and I'm not a person that has a bunch of bodyguards, I'm not an important person. So yeah, I was nervous, but, I had my colleague that had been there and, has been reporting there, Roman Kostrov. Every year, for the last 12 years, he brings gifts to the children in the outer villages that are closer to the front. make sure that they get exactly what they want for Christmas. He saves up all year and pays for it himself and does that. And he asked me to be the snow maiden and come with him, and I did. And I also visited an animal rescue. And I'll tell you what, meeting those children, Natalie, was so moving because they've literally grown up with shelling because it's been since 2014.
Yes.
So imagine you're living somewhere and your government decides to call you a terrorist because you're, in their case, they're Russian nationals because they live there, they were born there, and starts shelling your farms, your houses. So I saw, and I sent you, hopefully you have a chance to look at the things that I was able to send you. I saw 2 villages right near the front that were obliterated by Ukrainian forces, and they used the people as human shields. And then when they retreated, they bombed them out. And then to add insult to injury, they took personal bombs, butterfly bombs, and put them out. They look like little butterflies. They're called petal explosives. And they
They are
sprinkled out.
illegal, but under international standards. But
Yeah.
that.
So I couldn't even get out of the car. Like when I wanted to look closer at some of the buildings, and you could see in the shells of the building this beautiful tile and beautiful things that were. So these were old villages that had been in families for how long? Farms and I asked the city head administrative that I met later that day would tell me about those villages, and she said it had this beautiful school and post office, and it was a really tight community, these 2 villages of like 5,000 people. And it's so sad that the Zelensky regime is just destroying their own people. I mean, it's really at the, bequest of the West, of, UK and
Right.
America and whatnot.
No, you don't see it so much anymore, but you used to see a lot of idiots online saying Russia needs to give that land back. Ukraine can't stop until they give their land back. It's laughable if you've watched this conflict that could happen. But let's put military tactic aside. Is it the will of those people? Because when you say they wanted to be Russia, they have been asking for this for over a decade. They voted. Idiots will say, oh, they were under duress. They didn't mean it. So what is your sense of whether or not they want to be Russian nationals now?
Well, I talked to some of the parents, and one of the things about the children that's really interesting is for their Christmas presents, they asked for Russian flags and Russian memorabilia. They're really proud. But the parents were very clear. They were so relieved. They're so relieved. And in Donetsk, you see life kind of going back to normal, because remember that city center was just bombed, and people were, it was horrible what happened in Donetsk and on a daily basis. And now, you see the rebuilding, you see hope, you see people going about their business in a positive way. I haven't been down to Mariupol. I hope to make a trip down there, but they rebuilt that theater, but they're doing a lot of rebuilding in the areas that now Russia's there. But there's a relief, because imagine Zelensky's regime was shelling them. So of course they're relieved they have now the Russian infrastructure. And that means medical and education and stability. And and they're able to put food on the table for their children. And everybody wants the same thing wherever you are in the world, right? You want your children to be safe. You want them to be fed. You want access to medical care and education. And you want to be able to walk outside without worrying about stepping on a petal mine and being blown to bits.
Right. And so, my assessment has always been that a lot of it was war propaganda, the Russian aggression, the body bags, all of that. And now we see that repeated in Venezuela, in Iran, in Gaza, when these death counts are politicized and you're supposed to believe whatever gives America the right to be the aggressor. And now we're 3 years past. What do you think? It feels like we've learned nothing from those original inflated numbers, death numbers in Bucha and what have you. And that's where I go dark. How do you feel about that? Have we learned to wait?
Well, I'm with you, Natalie. It's very, I mean, imagine for a person who's just trying to put food on the table in America and just going to work 9 to 5, trying to pick up their kids at school, going about your day, you want to be able to turn on a news outlet and trust it.
Yeah.
And 75% of Americans don't trust their own news outlets anymore. That's why it's good that you and Clayton are bringing news and bringing a different view because it's become so propagandized. And now people are so aware of it that they're looking at TikTok, they're looking at X, they're looking at independent. And what I mean by independent is people that aren't corporate puppets,
Hmm.
right, giving the news. And so I think just, I was having the same feeling about Iran because I'm not an expert in the Middle East at all. And it was very confusing information. If you're just like churning the channel, like you don't know what's what. And so I think people just have to accept that in this day and age, they have to be very discerning and they have to keep asking the questions and keep trying to listen to different points of view and then come to a conclusion.
I really feel
And,
like these two events in January, the first 2 weeks of January of 2026, we should have learned to wait and not hand anyone power that is the government. So we had the shooting in Minneapolis where people could take two opposing views and then hate each other for it, right? And we should have learned from George Floyd, wait a little bit before you run your mouth on X. And then we have the war in Iran with these what seems to me hugely inflated death numbers, which is giving the US and Israel carte blanche to go to war because of manufactured outrage. Shouldn't we have learned from the last 5 years to wait? And that's not in our nature. And I feel like we're failing. But I don't know. There's some of
it's
us who will.
clickbait. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
right.
they keep using the same emotional tactics, right? Like getting that emotional hook,
Yeah.
saying that people are going to be hanged, like right in Iran. Are they? How many? What's going on? Let's be specific. And is this, and then who's hopping on that and saying, oh, we got to go to war? Well, is it Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump?
Right.
Okay,
The
well,
National
maybe we should look at
Endowment,
that.
which
Right.
which
Right.
orchestrated the war in Ukraine under Victoria Nuland. Victoria Nuland is now an ambassador to the National Endowment, but they're the ones now giving us the death numbers. No, thank you. I'll take that from somebody else, please. So,
Right. And remember her slip up with the biolabs as well in Ukraine. She finally
exactly.
admitted that, yeah,
What do
yeah,
you think of
after
that? Have you
denying it.
seen any biolabs? Have you seen any reporting on this? Any evidence?
I personally have not seen it. I have seen evidence of, from the same evidence you've seen through
Hmm.
reporting that they exist. And then, of course, she misspoke and it was revealed that they exist. And I think there's 12 or 13, I believe. And it's concerning because what's happening? There's literally battle going on around biolabs. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? What will be unleashed if something happens? Also, there's a nuclear power plant. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are really concerning. And then, we have all these other hot spots that are coming up. And I'll be honest, I'm really shocked at how quickly well, let's call it not even the deep state, the neocons got a hold of Donald Trump's ear,
Hmm.
and all of his peace president stuff went out the window. Because, okay, let's say we take Greenland, we are going to annex Greenland, and that might end NATO. Well, okay, NATO needs to end anyway, but does it have to end that way?
Yeah.
Does Venezuela have to lose its sovereignty? All these foreign adventures that are costing so much money. Again, I go back to American people, and my daughter lives in America. She's married, and it takes both their incomes and a big struggle to just make it. They're, young people. And Americans keep getting left behind. Their infrastructure, healthcare, education, bridges, roads, and how long can America keep doing that? And how long will Americans keep voting for these politicians that do the same thing over and over with these endless wars?
Right. I saw a tweet recently that said the good news is that this will cost Republicans the midterms. The bad news is that Democrats will win because neither of
Yeah.
them
I mean,
seem to
that's
have the
worse. I mean,
interest.
well,
Yeah.
is it? Yeah. They're both, it's like one, I feel sorry in a way right now for Americans and being an American. It's just, um, there doesn't seem to be a way out. I guess the only way out is through, and being aware of what's going on, unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences of what Donald Trump is doing right now will probably lose him the midterms because, let's face it, inflation hasn't budged. I saw that Redacted put out a poll, and 75% of the people answered your poll saying they don't believe Donald Trump, that the prices have gone down. And your audience is pro Donald Trump, some of them. So I don't know.
A lot of them want to be, but they're lucid about
Yeah.
the fact that these promises have not been fulfilled. And I appreciate that about Republican voters, because they're not like Democratic voters who will dig their heels in and support someone even when there's evidence to the contrary. Republicans don't seem to be like that. So I find that slightly comforting, that they will make noise when they didn't get what they were promised. I'm glad for that.
And I don't know where Tulsi is in all of this too, because I met her, and as you know, at Rage Against the War Machine, she and I were both speaking there, and I talked to her, and I just don't understand why she hasn't even resigned, like because of what happened with Venezuela and then what was happening with Iran. But hopefully,
she pushed a lot of independents over the line for Donald Trump, myself included. I felt like, okay, if she's close to this administration, there will be adults in the room. Zachary Levi, the actor, sort of advocating for these Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. types. It felt like, I don't know, they've had they're like Ariel, their voice boxes have been ripped out. I'm sorry for the Disney reference.
And she was sidelined, during the Venezuela thing. So I don't think she was consulted. She was in Hawaii or whatever. But it is concerning because then that begs the question: who is got Trump's ear? What does that mean for the peace plan with Russia? Because you don't see him lifting sanctions against Russia. You don't see him really taking any real positive action. Russia's been clear since, back in. With the Turkish member in Istanbul peace talks, very clear about what they want. So who's really objecting is Zelensky in the UK, and Zelensky is illegitimate president. So I think until he's removed, I don't know how these peace talks are going to go forward. And unfortunately, it's a very volatile situation in Europe, between Europe and Russia right now.
Yeah. Well, I want to really thank you for your perspective. I do think it's a sacrifice for you, even if you have a nice life, even if you have nice work and you like where you live, it's still very hard to be a foreigner, even though you have a passport. You are still sacrificing your, you live as an expat, and that's hard. But I think people don't understand how there's just like a cultural shorthand that you don't have in your everyday living, and you never asked for this. And so I'll let you respond to that. I'm maybe projecting my experience as an expat when I lived in Portugal for 5 years, and I realized, how that's hard. You can romanticize, but it's actually quite hard. And so you didn't seem like you romanticized this like one of those I'm out of here type idiots. You know what I'm talking about? Donald Trump won, I'm out of here. That's not
I was
you.
just coming to visit.
Right.
In fact, so it's been, I appreciate your empathy with that, because I just decided, and this is my attitude towards life, and I tend to be, we all have our religion. I'm a Catholic background, and I may be converting to Orthodox Christian, but right now I'm Catholic. I've been Catholic. And so my spirituality is very important to me. And I don't, for some reason, I was placed in the situation. That's how I look at it. And rather than be, resentful, I have so much gratitude for the people here that have welcomed me. I mean, it's not like I was of any benefit to Vladimir Putin or to Russia, right? Like, who am I, right? I didn't have any secrets. I didn't have any advantage. In fact, if anything, it was just kind of a pain in the ass because it was another, political quagmire, right? That's playing out. But they were so generous and wonderful. And how can, why? So I just decided to embrace the experience. I'm here, live it, go all in. I'm learning language, learning the culture, and being positive about it. And my daughter is a young adult, and I want to model for her, look, things happen in life, and sometimes you don't have control, but it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I mean, you seem to really have made lemonades and lemonades. That's not a plural.
Lemonade.
Lemonade
Yes,
out
out of
of
lemons. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm
A little bit
always
of
happy.
caviar.
There you go. I'm always happy to hear your experiences and, get your perspective. So thank you for offering your time to come on Redacted.
Oh, thank you. And I watch your show every time, so I will keep watching, and I hope everyone else does too. Take care.
Thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah.